Hello, I'm Larry. Welcome to my travel blog. I started traveling in the mid 70s. Then I started traveling more like 25, 30 years ago. So in those days, you had to use Blogger or MYTB or iWeb or something like that. So some of my early stories aren't on this site. I may add some of those later. But what happened for me was I left Northwest Kansas, where I grew up on a farm. And as a junior in college, I got a scholarship to go to Western Kentucky University, which was a nationally ranked track team. I was a javelin thrower. And as I left the farm and headed east, going from the prairies and the farmlands and seeing a sign on the interstate that said, next rest area 125 miles, the farther east I went, the more things changed. And then all of a sudden, I couldn't see the horizon for the hills and the trees. Then I got into humidity. I got into Kentucky, and people talk different. I remember the first time I asked a friend if they wanted to go get a bite to eat, and they said something like, "Well, don't make me no, never mind." I'm like, "What?" And I had to learn how to translate that because it was just a different culture. So I'm close to Mammoth Cave. I'm close to Nashville, Tennessee. I'm on the track team, and I'm going to professional conferences. So in a short time, I got exposed to Biloxi, Mississippi, Atlanta, Georgia, Savannah, Georgia, going to Beale Street in Memphis after having participated in a track meet, going to Knoxville, Tennessee, getting exposed to the Smoky Mountains, and this whole world opened up. So at a very early age, I decided I wanted to see everything as much as possible. I went to grad school in Salt Lake City because it's close to 75% of the national parks. It wasn't the only reason, but that was a big draw. So when I got out there, I got involved with teaching mountaineering and winter camping and cross country skiing and backpacking and all of those sort of things. And then I was teaching at the University of Louisville, and I loved teaching, but I didn't do well with the structure and the politics and all of that sort of thing. Something was really bugging me there. And what bugged me was I felt like the university was exceptional at teaching people to memorize, which is a fairly useless skill. But it wasn't good at teaching people to learn how to learn, which is what I wanted to do. So I went up putting all my stuff into storage, loading my car with my camping gear, my bicycle, some good books, and food. And I headed off traveling around the United States for literally 15 months. And what I was doing was interviewing people on how do you teach people to learn how to learn. Now, before I left, somehow this quote from Socrates popped into my life, and the quote is, "Wherever you go, there you are." And I realized at that time that if I wasn't careful, I wasn't going towards something, I was running away from something. And if you're trying to move away from something, you can't get away with it from it. You're going to always be dragging it with you. So those two things happened. I went looking for people that I could meet that could give me some insights into how do you help people learn how to learn. But the other thing was kind of a lifelong principle of what is my purpose? What am I moving toward? What is it I want out of this experience or this adventure? And there have been times in my life where I traveled to escape and get away, but then I was always in culture shock when I came home. So then I started learning how to stay present wherever I was and whatever I was doing. So those are the early experiences that got me involved with travel. So what my blog evolved into was essentially when I was traveling, this was a place for mom and dad living in Northwest Kansas to tune into me on the other side of the world every couple days and see pictures and photographs and stories, where I was, what I was doing, who I was meeting. And they really got interested in that. And then it started evolving into friends that I have here that don't travel a lot that were just curious about travel. And then it's evolved into a couple things. One of them is last week, again, I had people comment to me, it's like, "Oh, travel, that's something I'd like to do someday." And I'm like, someday is generally code for never. And what I started realizing because of having early travel experiences, I left the US in the late 80s with my backpack to go travel with the backpack for the first time and had no idea what I was doing. And I was literally kind of terrified. But I also knew I'm not going to die. If I don't like it, I can come back. And the thing I was most crystal clear about is if I don't begin, I'm never going to learn. The thing I didn't do well was plan the trip well. I went for 2.5 months instead of for 2.5 weeks. And that was a little bit challenging, but man, did I learn so much about myself. So back to someday, when I have people tell me they'd like to travel someday, I can hear their brain clicking on beliefs and limitations and assumptions and how expensive it is and how difficult it is. And I'm like, you're just hallucinating because until you have some experience, I could explain to you what it's like sleeping in a snow cave in the winter when it's 25 below in the Tetons. But unless you've been there and you actually have an experience, you're hallucinating what you think it's like. But you're not hallucinating what the best parts are. So I started having this experience of helping people learn how to begin. If you want to travel someday, there's one crucial thing you have to do, and that is you have to start. And so that's one thing that I'm doing during my travel, and I'd like to do more of here at the blog for people that have that dream. How do you do it? So when I went to Borneo last year, I checked into some companies because I thought it might be easier to get a tour company to take me where I wanted to go. The first one I looked at gave me a quote of something like $2,500 for 3 days and 2 nights, and I wound up planning everything myself because I know how to do that from experience. I didn't spend $2,500 for 11 days in the jungle. So one of the things I'd like to do here is help people that have this dream of traveling figure out a way to start, because until you get some experience, you really don't know what it's all about and you have nothing to build upon. The other thing, one of my favorite parts about travel is just the richness of conversation and connection that happens with people every day. I'll have 6, 7, 8 conversations with people I meet, and immediately we're kind of sharing life and dreams and hopes and what are you doing and what motivated you to travel and how is your life different now since you're traveling. And I come back to the States, and the culture here, people are really generally too busy to have much conversation like that. That conversation fills my soul. So what I haven't done in the past is include very much of that conversation in any way in my blog. So I'm going to add some of that. You'll see a section on the blog called, I'm not sure yet what it's going to be called. It's going to be like Inspiration, Inspired Living, but I know it's going to include Planet Larry. And just briefly what that means is I meet people traveling and I can hear them expressing beliefs or rigidity or fears or concerns that aren't essential. And then as we're talking, I'll share with them how I look at things. And they'll look at me like, that's really different. And then I found myself joking with them and saying, well, that's how things work on Planet Larry. And then I realized it's not a joke. That's how things work on Planet Larry. So I'm going to add that whole section that has to do with inspiration. I use this quote often. Everybody dies, but not everyone will live. And so I believe it's crucial and really critical for people to be clear on their purpose. What is central to your life? What's really important to you in life? Americans spend $40 billion a year on storage and self-storage, which is just nuts to me. It's like you're going to feel better by buying more stuff. So what's central in your life? And as you get clear on that, how do you move in that direction? And there's this like cultural group fit in, do the right thing sort of thing. And I've really spent some time deciphering what is it I believe in my world that's separate from what other people have tried to talk me into believing. And so that's been a part of my travel journey, and I'm going to include that here in the blog in a little bit in some way. So I think the last thing I'll say is the name for the blog, A Walkabout with Larry, came from a conversation I had in Costa Rica about 25 years ago. And there was this like retired music instructor, 70-something guy, pot belly, tiny Speedo swimsuit, just strutting down the beach as happy as could be. And people told me he's from the Czech Republic, so I introduced myself one day and I told him, my grandfather migrated, my last name is Prohaska. And then what he started doing was literally singing my name, Prohaska. And then he looked at me and he said, well, do you know what that means? I'm like, I have no idea. And he goes, well, Prohaska literally means to go for a long walk or to go walk about. So that's where the name for my travel blog has come from. So I don't write a conventional blog. I don't do like the nuts and bolts and details of where to go and how to get there. I read a blog recently that said like everything you need to know about from our 48 hours of being there. And my sense is if you've only been there 48 hours, you don't know it yourself yet. And so a lot of that headline stuff is about marketing and advertising and ranking and so forth. What's important to me is to share my experience, the people I meet, the principles I'm living by, and how it touches my life, and the people I meet, and the interaction that we have and the way we touch each other's life. So if you're interested in that, this is the place. If you have any questions, want any advice, curious about anything about foods or travel or what have you, let me know. So let's travel together and have some fun. Make yourself a great life and take care of yourself. Ciao.